Hey Aaron, Shabbat Shalom. Hey Phoebe, Shabbat Shalom, good to see you. Hey Rye. So we have some New York, some California, some Taiwan. Good to see everyone. Welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through an Hebraic worldview of Scripture as well as our times. We are in the second part of kind of an interesting series called Stages of Spirituality. If you didn't catch last week's teaching, I highly suggest you do it because we really laid a lot of foundation. Hey, Rebecca, good to see you. Good. Ready for your Shabbat from grad school, of course. Good to have you with us. If you've ever heard yourself saying, how could they think, do, say this series may help you to understand where people are in their stages of spirituality, ourselves included. Now, just to recap, all stages are necessary, and you cannot skip one. It's actually not like grief stages, which we talked about last week a bit, but you can regress sometimes. So you can maybe be here and regress. All stages are important. They're purposeful, and we have good elements to them that we bring with us in our growth and our maturity, as well as there's challenging ones in the stages as well. They then kind of collectively come together to make up spiritual growth. So I'm sort of using, hey Mary, good to have you with us. I'm sort of using a mashup of these terms because there's a lot of people that have developed different names and all different kinds of hierarchies for these stages of spiritual growth. I'm using predominantly Ken Wilber, who's a philosopher and an author, and James Fowler, who's a pastor, a professor, an author, and a theologian. And oftentimes colors are associated with these stages so that they're kind of easier to identify, which I have done. So let's recap a bit from last week. First of all, there was the archaic or the primal stage. That's stage one. It is basic survival. It's not logical, nor is it spiritual. And it's the color tan. Now, let me just say, if we don't get through this tonight, it's okay. We can just save what we don't do until next week. So if you have questions or comments, and again, just to recap what we talked about last week, I'm going to do a teaching at the end of this about how we progress through and how we can maybe encourage others to come out of one stage and in the other stage as well. So if you have questions, if you have comments, we can do a little slower through tonight. So again, number one, tan, archaic, primal. Number two is magic, intuitive. And we covered this last week. And again, this is me. This is egocentric. So these two are about myself. So the second phase, magic, intuitive, or the purple, this is very much about feelings and your desires. I want what I want. And magic gives me what I want. In this stage, I don't connect to why things happen, just if they happen. So therefore, one tends to believe there is a magical formula or gods that will bring me my wants. And as I mentioned last week, we kind of see this in parallel with a person, a human being, as they're born and they grow. We can kind of see these stages. And we also see it in our world history as well. So in this stage, the Bible is sort of related to in the same way that one relates to fairy tales. And there is a lot of focus on miracles. In fact, that's the primary focus. In the magic intuitive stage, now track with me here, symbols are often used, and that symbol is indistinguishable from the actual thing. Now, let me explain what that means. Like a flag. So, in this stage, a flag would be used to not just to represent as a symbol of the thing, but the flag would be used as a thing itself, that somehow it turns into the thing itself. So like a flag is, which is the country, or a map of the United States, which is the people, or the Bible, which is God. Someone holds up a cross and tells Satan he has to bow, right? This is the kind of behavior and actions we see in this stage. So if I'm a religious leader or a political leader, I can use a symbol to manipulate both my reality and others' reality. And this, again, this stage is driven by intuition. It's about what I feel, what I think is right. Because I want it to be so, it is. If you've ever heard someone say when you show them facts, maybe you've experienced this, so they'll say something and you say, okay, let me just take a deep breath. Let me just present facts to them. And after you do it and it's thoughtful, it's factual, they say, well, I just don't believe that. They're in this stage, right? It's me, it's egocentric, it's magic, intuitive, it's about feelings. This stage can also actually be very disempowering. In this stage, people may say, oh, well, I have a family curse, or I just have bad luck, or Satan stole the election, right? So outside things can affect me negatively, and it's just accepted. All right, so this is stage 2. Stage 3, and again, we talked about all these last week. Stage 3 moves to us or ethnocentric. So ethnocentric in the sense that it's very tribal, okay? This particular part is very tribal. This is the mythical stage. This is the red, and it's mythical, literal. Now, the myth is a story that is told. So a story is told, this is the animating story that is the foundation of life. Like maybe good versus evil, or American exceptionalism. Or if you believe you will be rich, you will be rich. It's this animating myth. And in this stage, we take things quite literally. This is why someone can hear a president mention bleach will kill SARS-CoV-2 and he actually drinks bleach. In this stage, there is always a polarized good versus evil with nothing in between. Okay, so this person will listen to somebody or watch something and say this person is either from the devil or they're from God. It is very literal. Everything is very literal. We, in this stage, are part of a tribe that believes the right doctrine. This is very much a part of this stage. We believe the right doctrine, and we are the chosen people. There is an expectation and acceptance of sacrifice that's required for the good of the tribe. So in this part here, there's very much an expectation of sacrifice for the good, right? We're all expected to sacrifice for the good of the tribe. Rebecca says mythical literal sounds like evangelical church to me. It does indeed. It's very much the Western evangelical model. No question about that. It's very much the tribe, the team, the sacrifice, believe the 16 tenets of faith. When my husband and I were new in our faith, when we were we hung out in these two stages right here. When we were new in our faith, I remember we visited a church service one night. It was a different church than the one we went to. And again, we're talking about, follow this, an animating story that you literally take in and act out of. So I remember we visited a church service, and the minister taught, and then afterwards he did an altar call where you come up and ask people to give their hearts to the Lord. And he didn't have, we were used to when you did an altar call that you prayed, quote, the sinner's prayer. And he didn't have the people confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord. When he brought them up, he just prayed for them. And my husband and I were beside ourselves. We got in the car. We were so upset. And we thought, again, we were new in the faith. We're living here. If those people got in a car accident on the way home, straight to hell. That's what we thought. Again, this is mythical, literal. And when we went back to our church leaders and told them what happened, what they said to us, again, mythical, literal, oh my gosh, that's a false teaching church. Don't ever go there again. This is very common in this stage. This group usually encircles around and gets its life from leaders. It's very hierarchical, where they're stuck. Yes, Ryan. And in fact, most people that kind of ascribe to this stages of faith believe that in fact, some people say 90% of people in the world are in these two stages and never progress, which is kind of alarming. So again, this group very much wants their leaders, and they get their life from their leaders, political leaders, church leaders. And these leaders are ordained by God in this stage. This is what we believe. God has them there. And these leaders tell them what to believe and what to do for the good of the tribe. And it's usually just swallowed whole. Now let's look at how this plays out in very real ways. Now let's look at Trump. Trump is a purple. He's a magic intuitive. I want what I want. I'm at the center of the universe. My reality is what I feel. Now, again, I don't know the man. I don't think I've ever met the man, but I'm just going on what he says and what he does, okay? My reality is what I feel. Now, again, this is the analogy of a child who is playing hide and seek. Maybe you remember doing this with young children, and you say, "Where's Maria?" And Maria hides her eyes, and she thinks you can't see her. And you pretend like you can, right? And then as soon as she takes her hands off her eyes, now she thinks you can see her. Very much here, right? This is in this group. Facts don't matter. My feelings are truth. So Trump, who moves in this magic and intuition, has a force from God as a leader. And here's what he does. He taps into those in this red area, mythical literalists, with a story about the great America, with a story about how evil is trying to steal your religious rights, your possessions, your job, your children, your personal freedoms. And I will hold up a Bible, again, a symbol. Symbol's very big because symbols become the thing. So now I'm standing with God. And I can move the real thing by using imagery and slogans. And the mythical, literal people, again, the ethnocentric people, respond to that. Not necessarily, or let's say not always because they're bad people or stupid people, but because they are in this stage here, the mythical, literal people. Are you with me? And do you see that? And so, is it really starting to make sense? Rebecca doesn't spell out the name, is really good at tapping into symbolism and manipulating people. Absolutely. You see how he's here? And you see how his base is here, right? Very much so. Aaron says all three of the stages have no depth in their actual faith. Absolutely. Hey, Elizabeth. Good to see you. Want the king, Karen is saying. Absolutely. This is the same thing as Israel did. We want the king. We want a leader. We want an animating myth. Absolutely. So again, this is the first three. We did them last week as well. We're going to move into 4. I'm not feeling pressured to rush. So if you have comments, questions, we can move through these as we move through these. Rebecca says, I don't spell the name. It's not to attract trolls. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. That's good. I never even thought of that, Rebecca. Thank you. Ryan's saying, but they still seem important because vibe feelings should be still influence further thinking study. Yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for bringing this up. Yes. I touched on it in the beginning, but I think we need to keep saying it again and again. Magic is beautiful. It creates all. And we should live in our life in all. And we should see, as our friend Shane says, everyday magic. It's important that we not lose magic. It's important that we not lose an animating story. So that's why we take these. It's also important for us to stay alive, okay? Which is why archaic is important for us, primal. So we take all these things with us. They're important for our growth. There's good in them. But when we stay in them, that's when we can get into trouble. And there's also downsides to them. So thank you very much for pointing this out. Aaron says, so do these stages have value when you're young? They're actually young or young in faith, but become detrimental when you stay there, kind of like when an adult stays childish. Yes, I think I just addressed that a bit. Let me know, Aaron. But yes, when we stay in something too long and don't know how to mature in it. So to bring magic, I very much ascribe to having magic in my life. Okay, I would lose hope if I didn't. I have a commitment to myself to live in awe and to see things. I mean, when I see the video of my granddaughter, to me, that's magic. Okay, I never want to lose that. But I know how to bring it with me as people do that move through the stage and incorporate it with them in a healthy way. Okay, so, but if we stay there and we stay too much with our feelings, and our feelings is all we base anything on, that's when we become, as Aaron says, unhealthy, for sure. Rebecca says, I've been harassed by 45's troll on Twitter, and I've heard of Jewish Shabbat services being bombarded by neo-Nazis, so we need to be careful. Thank you, Rebecca. I always think that we're kind of obscure, but absolutely. Hey, daughter, good to see you. Neats. Great to have you with us. So number 4, we're at rational, reflective, which is blue. And rational meaning based on reason and facts and logic. But again, we don't just become fact robots because we're taking this with us as well, which is why this is really important that you all are bringing this out. It's also connected to reflection, meaning to think deeper and looking within. It is a shift from believing because others do to developing spiritual beliefs of your own. It is the capacity to look at a greater degree of perspectives, to see things from a larger vantage point. It's actually expansion, but yet still within one group per se, which is why it's still us. It's still ethnocentric. Because this happens, it's good, it's expansion, but it's still within the group. It enjoins others into your story, but it is still tribal because it's the us others. So it's movement, it's growth, but it's still us. So in this stage, you may say something like, because again, you're using rational, and so you may look at facts and say, hey, I know I've always been taught that the Bible is 6,000 years old. That's what they told me in my Sunday school class. But I'm seeing this carbon dating stuff with dinosaurs, and the Earth can't be 6,000 years old. Could it be as I study Hebraic literature from Jewish writers, and they say Genesis was written in a very normal Hebraic literary style as a polemic against paganism. And it was actually talking about the nature of God and the fact that Elohim is the creator, and it's done in this story form. It's not scientific or historical facts. Now I can say, oh, I understand this story in a different way. That's rational and reflection. Okay? So we understand, we connect using rationality and reflection. Are you with me on that? This often happens when people encounter others' stories, when they are exposed to different kinds of ideas. And there's, again, a rationality to this, meaning in this stage, you're not as likely to just accept things that are told to you without examining them. And this is why people will see a meme or read some sort of post and say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me, intuition, feeling, right? And so therefore I believe this, but they never investigate anything. They don't investigate the source of the post. They don't investigate the statistics. They don't know how to relate to it. They don't know anything. They're overwhelmed. Yes, we all are, but they're here with the feelings as opposed to here with the rational. This is the Christian kid that grew up in a Christian school and now goes to Stanford. Okay, and what does this student go through? It is also what is happening right now in our Western church culture. We're questioning things. We're challenging things. I saw a post by our own Shabazz challenging church pastors that are saying to come back to church. This is what we're doing now, right? We're not just accepting it anymore. We're using our logic. It can be a time of deep anxiety and soul searching, though. And for all of us who have gone through this phase, you remember what it felt like when you began to question everything? I mean, it's a thing. And it can make us quite anxious, where our faith is shaken to the core at this stage. This is why a lot of people resist this. They may step their toe in the river and say, oh no, I can't do this. This is too scary. I knew what my foundation was before. And so some people will go here, but they'll pop right back into the mythical. Let's see what y'all are saying. It feels like the transition from red to blue when openness begins. Absolutely, Aaron. Yep, agree with you. Hey, Derek, good to have you with us. And that jump is the hardest for most Christians. It really is, Aaron, no question. It was hard for me. I'm sure it was hard for you. And sometimes I remember when I would do this, I would kind of jump in. And I did this, by the way, as a pastor. I was a pastor when I was doing this. So I had a responsibility for people that I was teaching. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, it was so much easier when I could just say this, say it this way, say it that way. And all of a sudden, when everything started to look different, and I started to learn about context, and I started learning how to learn, it really is a very vulnerable and scary place to be, which is why not everyone is chomping at the bit to get there. Good to have you, Derek, and welcome. Shabbat Shalom. Glad you're off work. Rebecca's saying I definitely went through this when she started going to AKC. Rebecca, I remember that. I think it was at, what was the name of the restaurant? El Cid. It was the name, and you used to look at me sometimes like, what are you talking about? But the reason, Rebecca, you were able to go through it was because for whatever reason, hopefully it was our community. It gave you the feeling that you could ask anything, that nothing was out of bounds. And you asked a lot of questions, Rebecca. And when we would try to talk about them, you would say, I need to think about that. That's the healthy way to go through it. Ryan's saying, when I went to uni, I went there with the blue rational mindset and learned that they were still in the red mythical, absolutely, and mushed my brain, but I think may have thrusted me into the orange. That's interesting. Yeah, because you went to a more blue high school, Ray, and then you unfortunately regressed, not you personally, but you went into a culture that was not that. Rebecca says, I definitely went through this when I started going. Oh, I just read that. I remember when people would be like, the Bible has contradictions, and it messed with my brain. Absolutely, Rebecca. And when we're rational, we can clearly see the contradictions. Because again, why was it written the way it was written? It was written to tell you a story about something. It wasn't written as a history book. It wasn't written as a science book. That's not the purpose of the Bible. I don't understand why this is still in the us column. I'm going to get to that in 1 second, Aaron. It's close, but it's still in the us column. Beth is saying, the first time I went through this, I found GTT. I was terrified, but the 33 3rd Street crew got me through that. I remember that too, Beth. Oh man, I love being part of our community, right? Because we've done this with so many people, even as we were growing ourselves. And I just love that about ourselves. Hey, Randell, good to see you. Growth often makes us uncomfortable, but what often results unknowingly is intellectual, emotional, and spiritual maturity. Absolutely. And actually, the thing is, even with a contradiction, there's really no contradiction in the contradiction, because it encompasses all things. Okay? Which is, I know, we'll wait till we get over there. So this is where your faith is shaken. And then when you let it go and it kind of falls apart, then the Lord kind of comes in, and along with the community, you sort of put everything back together again in a new way, in a way that looks different. Those core values probably haven't changed, but the way you relate to things changes. And in this stage, the individual takes personal responsibility for their beliefs and feelings. They own them, and they give answers for them. So if someone asks you in your faith, why do you believe this, or what do you believe about this? You say, hey, this is what I believe in. This is why I believe it. As opposed to in here, it's more like, well, the Bible says it, that settles it. That's not really answering anything, right? Here we actually own what we believe. And even if that owning is, I don't know about that, I'm still a little uncertain, that's okay. So again, they give answers for them. What was the first question Moshe asked? I think I'm going to end at here tonight. So if you have questions, feel free to answer it. What was the first question Moshe asks Yahweh when he encounters him in the desert? Now, the very first question that Moshe asks when he encounters God in the desert. Do you remember what that is? Without looking it up. First question. I actually answered this wrong when I was thinking about it, because I was reading something where it says, oh yeah, when Moshe did this, this, and this, and it was in line with what I was teaching. What was the first question? I actually answered it wrong. So what was the first question Moshe asked in the desert? Aaron says, yeah, there's more ownership and accountability starting in the blue group. Yeah, also, just to answer your question now and not make you wait for it, in this blue group, the reason why it's still an us is because it's being done in community, and which is good, which is a good thing, but it's still an us mentality. In other words, we're not necessarily willing in this time to jump out into a group that is completely on the other, as we used to say, antipodal point yet at this point. We're not quite ready there yet. Okay? We're more interpreting and applying and evaluating things in our group. So we trust our own group, and so we're talking through in our own group. Kind of like how we did it back in 33rd Street as we were kind of going through our changes and growing. We did it in community. But I don't know that I would be willing to go to my district council meeting and talk through things with them, or an atheist group and talk with things with them, because it was you were almost too vulnerable. You had to kind of sort things out within the group first, if that makes sense. So that's why it's still an us. It's still ethnocentric. Aaron says it's still tribal in terms of safety. Absolutely. And it's good. It's part of the process. So Moshe is in the desert. Does anyone remember what his first question is? So picture this. He is a baby. The Pharaoh wants to kill all of the Jewish babies. He gets hidden in a basket. He gets put into the sea. The Pharaoh's daughter finds him. He gets raised in the palace. Remember, he sees some Egyptians torturing a Jewish person, and he jumps in, or an Egyptian, and he kills him. Remember? And then he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm outed with this. Like, people know about it because Jews said to him when he tried to break up a fight, what are you going to do? Kill us? So then he's like, oh my gosh, it's out there. So he runs away and he runs into a desert and he becomes a shepherd. And he's 40 years in this desert. And as he's shepherding, he notices that there's a burning bush that doesn't get burned up. Now, shepherds in the desert see burning bush all the time. It's a desert, okay? There's lightning, there's heat, bushes light on fire all the time. That's not what the big deal was. The big deal was that it wasn't getting burnt up. So Moshe now is using his rationale, his logic. Wow, that's not only magic, that's not only mythical, that's about why isn't this bush getting burned up when it's on fire? So it's rationality he's using here. He approaches it, and God speaks to him. And in Exodus 3, 6 through 12, I'm going to kind of cut parts out, but he says, I am the God of your father. Let's see if anyone takes a guess at what the first question is. Not yet. I am the God of your father, Adonai said. I have seen how my people are being oppressed in Egypt and heard their cry for release from their slave masters because I know their pain. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of that country to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now we see in verse 10, it says this, therefore, now come and I will send you to Pharaoh so that you can lead my people, the descendants of Israel, out of Egypt. Moshe says to God, who am I? Whoo! This is rational, reflective right here, right? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? He replied, I will surely be with you. So the first question that Moshe asks is, who am I? He's very much here. Rational, reflective. That's what drew him over to the bush. That's the first question that he asked. And again, this is us, ethnocentric. It's still for the tribe, but it's God through him, God with him. This level is not only growing up, but waking up. As opposed to Moshe earlier with the killing of the Egyptian who was oppressing the Jew, that was this mythical literalism, right? That was, I need to go in and kill this person because he's killing my people. Again, this is part of the process of growing up that Moshe went through. But rather, he grows into the knowledge of God in me. I am empowered and open. It's rational. It's reflective in my faith. It's still us. So I think I'm going to pause here for tonight. And next week, we'll get into those last two so we can kind of leave enough room for questions. And then after that, we're going to do a talk about how we move through these, because there's sort of keys in all these that unlock that door that allow you to pass through. And by the way, all of it requires courage, which is why, as Ryan says, most people live right here. All of it requires courage. When you leave here, you lose control. You lose power, don't you? You lose, I am the center of the world. You lose, I want to believe what I want to believe. And you're always being challenged, which is very much up here. Derek says, who am I? Yeah, isn't that a lot of us walking with Christ? Absolutely. Yep. You get claps. You all get claps. I posted about that in the membership group, Aaron. I posted that. I posted what's up with the candles in the membership group, and this is the candle I was talking about, okay? The Shemesh candle. So you'll see that in the membership group. So I love you all. Shabbat Shalom. We'll keep talking through this. It's very fun, and hopefully it gives us all some understanding of why people are doing what they're doing and how we can see ourselves in this stage. And Ryan says, more please. And it's okay. And we can see ourselves in this stage, and we can also see others in this stage. And then again, continue to move on how we can keep going and how hopefully we can encourage our loved ones or even people that we talk to about how to keep going. So I love you all. Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy your weekend.